Om Ayahi Varade Devi Traksare Brahmavadini Gayatri Chandasang Mata Brahmajani Namastute. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrittor Ma Amritangamaya Aviravir Maedhi Rudra Jatte Dakkinamukham Te Namang Pahinityam Te Namang Pahinityam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O Divine Mother of the Universe, reveal Thyself in our hearts and in our midst. We invoke Thy presence amidst us. Thou art the sacred words of the Scriptures. Thou art the embodiment of knowledge and liberation. Thou art the supreme bridge to immortality. Lead us from unreal to real, from darkness to light, from death, disease, and suffering to immortality. Manifest Thyself in us through and through, and protect us with Thy compassionate face. Om, peace, peace be unto us, peace be unto all living beings. This morning I intend to speak on the subject, Vedanta in the Western way. Vedanta literally means end of the Vedas. Veda Anta. This is the final teaching of the Vedas. It is the consummation of the spiritual thoughts of all Hindu traditions. The conclusions of Vedanta are based on universal principles and are applicable to all people of all times. Vedanta reflects the mood and outlook of Eastern spirituality. Its echo can be heard in Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, and other spiritual traditions of the East. The way of Vedanta is direct and decisive, breaking the barriers of traditions and conventions, cutting through the speculations of theology, philosophy. Vedanta leads the individual soul to its inevitable destiny, union with God or the ultimate reality. It pushes its search for truth as far as human reason can go and seeks to reach the dizzy heights where everything is reduced to pure consciousness. Though developed and perfected in the Indo-Gangetic plane, Vedanta cannot be called Hindu way or Indian way, just as the law of gravitation cannot be called the British law. Its view of the ultimate, that is one reality without a second, known as Brahman. Brahman has, though designated by the word, it cannot be indicated by the word. It is nameless, formless, and beyond all attributes. Various traditions give names: Allah, Vishnu, Jehovah, God, Father in heaven, varieties of epithets. Nothing wrong, but these are our superimpositions. For the fulfillment of the seekers of truth, the supreme ultimate reality assumes forms. Not only just we give superimpose, but he assumes. The individual soul is the focus of the ultimate. Individual soul is a layered being whose soul is encased by 5 seats: physical body, vital air, mind, intellect, and the seed of bliss. What we know to be our soul, actually that is not the soul. That is the ego self. True soul is the self, the focus of the ultimate reality, being called Atman. It is the consciousness of all consciousness, reality of all realities. Its presence and absence in a human body makes a person dead or alive. It is the same soul or self lives in all beings. That is one of the most controversial and most important fact of life. The soul in you and soul in me, self, is the same. As it's a God dwells in all beings. The world is a dynamic manifestation of the ultimate in time and space. By its own inscrutable power, the ultimate manifests. The world which we know and we live, that is our manufactured world. The true world is the soul lives in all. And the world of reality is only one. God alone exists, nothing else. This ultimate has 2 faces. One is the reality for all times. The other, relative reality for 2 days, 200 years, 2000 years. This being called as Maya. The Buddhist tradition calls it as Maro. The Taoist tradition calls it being out of harmony with Tao. The Judeo-Christian tradition personifies it as Satan. Islam as Iblis. The Zoroastrians as Ahriman. And Platonism refers it to delusion. Beings and things in the realm of Maya, relative world, are illusory, but not non-existent. Just like in a magical show, you see a person hacking another person with a chainsaw. You cannot say this is absolutely false because you see it. At the same time, you know in heart of heart that cannot be true. You do not go to Broadway to watch a murder scene. You know that very well. But you cannot deny it. So therefore, truth and imagination, when they mix, it creates relative. When you forget the absolute, the relative world of values, hopes, desires, they become self-destructive. You know the Hindu image of Kali, Kali standing on the body of Shiva. Shiva is the absolute. Kali is the power. When Shiva not standing and joining with the Kali alone, is death. The image has 4 hands. If you carefully see, on the right hand, boon. In the left hand, sword. And the decapitated head of a person. And the right, left, pointing out to Shiva, telling that this world has 2 phases. Don't forget the Shiva, the ultimate reality, one without a second. Don't be afraid. Those who deny this ultimate, ignore this inmost self, they will be chopped up. And that they had been chopped up, this is the example ahead. Nobody wants to call on God unless you show them the head chopped up. When things are fine, sit down on the couch and drink coffee and donut, continental breakfast. Suffering. We suffer not because of the retribution of God, luck, chance, hostile stars or planets, or any external agency. It causes attributes 5. Ignorance means ignore the ultimate fact. By that brings loss of contact with the ultimate. It's the center of our being. Loss of contact forces the individual to the world of ego, the fanciful world of polarization, imagination, and dream. Dream, its another name is desire. Nothing wrong. Without dream, there is no life. If it is all reality, there is no world, only God. So by dream, you banish God and create a dream world. Vedanta says dreams are nothing wrong, so long you can keep it in a limit. When dreams cross the threshold, you need a doctor to give you Valium. You know, they shrink your head. They're called head shrinkers. Means too many dreams in the mind. You flatten it. Sometimes that's why when you get older, your dreams becomes less. When you were young, flying in the cloudland of dreams, wait a few days, it will be flattened. So he cannot make a judgment. An old Jew and a young Jew are traveling on a train. I'm illustrating by a story. The young Jew asks, "Excuse me, sir, what time is it?" The old Jew does not answer. Again he says, "Excuse me, sir, what time is it?" The old Jew keeps silent. "Sir, I am asking you what time it is. Why don't you answer?" The old Jew said, "Son, the next stop is the last on this route. I don't know you, so you must be a stranger. If I answer you now, I'll have to invite you to my house. You are handsome and I have a beautiful daughter. You will both fall in love and you will want to get married. Tell me, why should I need a son-in-law who can't even afford to buy a watch?" Huh? So very pragmatic. So he was keeping silent. That is too much reality. A man was walking along a California beach and stumbled across an old lamp. He picked it up and rubbed it, and out popped a genie, a ghost. The genie said, Okay, you released me from the lamp, blah, blah, blah. This is the 4th time this month that I am getting a little sick of these wishes, so you can forget about. 3. You will only get one wish. The man sat and thought about it for a while, said, "I always wanted to go to Hawaii, but I'm scared to." fly, scared to fly, and I get very seasick. Would you please build me a bridge to Hawaii so that I can drive over there to visit? Think of that man, he's such stupid. He cannot fly and cannot go by boat. The genie laughed and said, that's impossible. Think of the logistics of that. How would the supports ever reach the bottom of the Pacific? Think of how much concrete, how much steel. No, think of another wish. The man said, okay, and tried to think of a really good wish. Finally he said, I have been married and divorced 4 times. My wives always said that I don't care and that I am insensitive. So I wish I could understand women, know how they feel inside, and what they are thinking when they give me this silent treatment. Know why they are crying, know what they really want, what then they're saying nothing, and know how to make them truly happy. Genie said, you want that bridge? Two You want that bridge? Then he said, 2 lanes or 4 lanes? Anyway, this is the human situation. This is human situation. Birth, death, pain, pleasure, they all apply to this fanciful world, to the ego's world. The goal is being said to know this inmost self. It alone can put an end to your sorrow, suffering. Loss of contact with the root cause of all evils that gives rise to exaggerated ego, that does not let you see the fact of life, obscures your vision. This darkness of ego can be overcome only by the light of knowledge. Knowledge, which is self-knowledge, is vital. Vedanta warns us, if we ignore this self, call it God by any name, you have no escape. You will meet this self at every step of your life as pain, suffering, disappointment, death. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says, I am death, I am time, I devour mountains and oceans. Those who ignore me, they have no escape. That will be their destiny. But again, I am knowledge, I am light, I am immortality, I am the abode of all happiness and peace. You cannot escape me. I'll take revenge upon you. Same way, your body and mind, if you do not treat them well, they will take revenge upon you. Mind, if you do not exercise it, proper diet, it will take revenge upon you. Body, if you do not give rest, it will take a big sabbatical, 1 year in a hospital. Do you know that? So which one is desirable? Little bit daily. Take care of it. The quest for immortality, it's a self-knowledge alone conquers death. The doctrine of total annihilation at the point of death is inconsistent with the desire for immortality. People do graffiti on the train and the wall, desire for immortality. When they're writing graffiti in the wall, it's telling, you forgot me. I am here. You cannot live in this city ignoring me. You have to see me. That is the expression. You know, when the sidewalks are made, all the city's people, including dogs, they're wanting to leave a footprint on that. So when we did that, we have to keep watch. You know, soft cement, if you want to put footprint, you have to do early. Next day, cement will get strong. Why? Desire for immortality. When you drive, you see the mountainside name, hello John, reminding you. People beget marry, beget progeny, desire for immortality. I will die, but my son will be my representative. A tree also puts seeds. Reproductive arts is a desire for immortality. But, so therefore there is no annihilation. Death is not the end of the story, only beginning. You died many times. That's why you have a natural fear of death. Cycle of birth and death would be endless. Shankaracharya in his Question of Discrimination says, let people quote scriptures. Priests and pastors assure you there is no liberation or immortality even in billions of years until you know this self. The doctrine of eternal heaven after death goes against logical thinking. Anything began in time will end in time. Everlasting life in terms of time is irrational. Doctrine of eternal suffering in the hell for mistakes of a few years on earth is contrary to any sense of God's justice and mercy. Self-knowledge is the inescapable destiny of every soul. Unconsciously, you are all proceeding, driven by circumstances, battered by sorrows, sufferings. You are changing every moment. What you thought 20 years ago, you are not thinking now. When you consciously do it, we call it a spiritual quest. When unconsciously, you are driven by forces of nature. You are being pushed against the wall. Liberation after death is a matter of faith and speculation. He who sees diversity in life will go from death to death. Diversity means difference. One of the principal basics of ethics, universe is one piece. That in one life it is pulsating in every heart. That only one soul lives. That is ethics. I cannot be happy keeping all around me people unhappy. And you cannot be happy unless all are happy. This is the oneness of existence. The continuation of a body after attainment of self-knowledge is incompatible with liberation. So the four cardinal principles of Vedanta are non-duality of the Godhead. God is only one. There is not one God for the Hindus, another for the Muslims, another for the Buddhists. Divinity of the soul. This inmost soul is divine. By bathing in water, you do not gain divinity. By listening to a discourse or talk or a lecture, you do not gain. By offering flowers at the altar, you do not. By eating sacramental food, prasad, you do not gain anything. What? They help you to gain faith in your divinity. That's all. You don't acquire divinity. You are already. But you lost faith. And oneness of existence, divinity of the soul, non-duality of the Godhead, and unity of faiths. Different religions and traditions, they are approaching the same ideal. Path should be different. Should be different. Swami Vivekananda says, if suppose in New York City there is only one restaurant, it will be boring. So different restaurants are there. You enjoy diversity. Knowledge and imagination. Knowledge cannot be enjoyed. Reality cannot be enjoyed. Enjoyment comes from imagination. Imagination is called creativity. To give an example, I invite you for dinner or lunch, different days, different menu. Then I gain knowledge. I said, why shall I cook? Human body needs a definite items of nutrition, protein, carbohydrate, amino acid, and so forth. I can buy from the health food stores. So I close the kitchen, stop shopping. I invite you, instead of food, each one you give 10 pills. He says, Swami, what is the food? I said, this is the most scientific dinner I am giving you. Why should you eat something which body will exit as excreta? This is your body needs, and this you will retain. You'll say, Swami is very boring. He has no innovation. He gives me the same 10 pills. Probably you will drop out of the invitation. Then I come, I give the same 10 pills, but today in the form of tofu, next day in form of chicken, next day in form of idli, sambar. You will say, well, this Swami has a great imagination and creativity. Actually, I am fooling you. I am giving you the same 10 pills, but in mixing with something. You imagine that you are eating different items. But actually I am doing the trick. I'm giving you the same 10 pills. So therefore, reality is the destroyer of illusion. People cannot take the blaze of reality. A new priest was taking over from an old pastor in a church. The new priest had a little memory problem. The old priest said, in weddings, these are the words, mantras. Everybody has mantras, Christian mantras, Hindu mantras. In the birthday baptism, mantras are there. He said, when you forget the mantras, right and left, you quote from the Bible. People generally never read Bible, therefore whatever you say, they will believe it is from the Holy Word. Similarly, you just repeat Sanskrit mantras, no matter what. Most people do not know. And it happened, a wedding came. And it happened, the new priest got nervous and forgot. So he repeated from the Bible, Lord, forgive them, they know not what they are doing. Now this is, actually he is quoting from the Bible. But he quoted the truth. As a result, people got nervous, those who came to marry. A mother and a little daughter came to wedding. So daughter said, why the girl is wearing white, Mama? Mother said, that is the happiest day of her life. White is the symbol of happiness. Then she said, why the groom is wearing black? So that is the fact. So the fact and fiction, you reduce the dosage of fact, then it will be fiction. Why people want to read novel? Tragedies, comedies. Why they don't want to read history or book of accounts? Huh? In a novel, characters are fictitious. But you enjoy that. You identify with one of the characters. In other things, it is not there. Tragedy. In the novel, tragic novels are most popular, do you know? Then those who bring comedy. Even television say, comedy of errors. Can you believe that? Human situation is very mysterious. Tragic novel. You spend $50 ticket in the Broadway. Before that, husband and wife, you spend $100 for dinner. Generally, if you go to Broadway, you have to eat dinner right there. You cannot eat at home and go to Broadway. That is unreasonable. Then you watch a theater or a movie, tragic, and you cry together. In a cry also, you need another person to sympathize you. Then you feel good. Come home. I often wondered, why you spend $200 to go and cry sitting in the hall? Why not sit at home and cry? That will not be enjoyable. These are called idiosyncrasies of human life. But they make life possible. This is one. The moment you say truth, then delusion rings. To keep you away from truth. If delusion rings all the time, truth will ring. This is too much. That's the rule. Vedanta's contribution to the world may be said to be the following. Spiritual democracy. Spiritual humanism. Enduring bond of world unity. Spiritual democracy, it gives you choice. In some countries, or some particular Western, there is democracy political, social, but not spiritual. Spiritual is authoritarian, church is sitting there. Democracy makes you think, exercise your judgment, not in others. Church says, no problem, you won't have to pray, we will pray for you, go home. People feel relieved. You know that. If I tell you, go home, I will pray for you. You will feel, oh, this is a very good Swami. They did not allow democracy. This is organized religion, that is the part of that. When religion becomes organized, it cuts corner. It is good for the average person. A frame, chalked out, creed, dogma. But it stifles vertical growth. See that in science, technology, democracy came. You can invent, experiment. Same way, in the field of spirituality, unless you invent, experiment, you do not get new horizon. That is contribution to Vedanta. It has minus points. When you give freedom, people cannot enjoy freedom. They go into excess. But it will keep the teaching alive. Spiritual humanism. You help, serve, not just human, but serve God. When you forget that, your charity, your help, they become human. The word human has a counterpart, divine. When you forget the divine, the human aspect generally deteriorates in course of time. And bond of unity. You always talk, one world, one family. I went to many conferences over the years. But how one world will happen? It is not the brotherhood or sisterhood. You cannot put all people into one faith. If the whole world becomes converted into Christianity or Hinduism tomorrow, nothing will change. Because each system has hundreds of sects. So how do you bind? Vedanta says, go back to the soul, self, which has no name. It is in the heart of all, purely spiritual. Forget about the theological trappings. You must find a world soul. Until then, you may talk, we are one, we are one, we are one. So somebody said in a marriage, the two become one. But which one? I went to a conference of women in Washington, D.C. Some rabbis were there, speakers were there. Hillary Clinton came, give the keynote address. High security. I told these two become one. And after that, several speakers repeated my story. Which one? Ideas of exclusive salvation, jealous God, chosen people are alien to Vedanta. Critics often perceive this unity as anthropomorphism. Science has proved that consciousness is as much present in the galaxy as it is in a tiny plant, animal, or human being. The universe is organically woven. Our present secular culture has broken the unity of existence. It has replaced cooperation, interdependence with competition, struggle for survival. It has ignored the Socratic teaching that knowledge is virtue and replaced it with its own, knowledge is power. This has set in motion a chain of reaction of alienation from reality, from nature, from our true self. Vedanta seeks to give us back our spiritual connection. This is the message of the Upanishads, the voice of the Bhagavad Gita, the song of the prophets and godmen past and present. Deviation from the wisdom of Vedanta always brought decline, moral chaos, material degradation. But 19th century, India witnessed an unprecedented spiritual eclipse in India. Vedanta lost its fire, vigor, ceased to be a social reality. Social reality means it can be a reality by a few philosophers and thinkers. Social reality means by the vast masses they practice that lost. That which the teaching of the strong-minded became a refuge for the weak and the escapists. Vedanta became life-negating. The spiritual values it championed became separated from material values, and that were their support. In search of God in heaven, the Vedantists ignored God in human heart. The connecting link between mysticism and humanism was lost. The followers of Vedanta forgot that holiness means nothing unless it brings happiness, that filling the empty stomach must come before filling the empty heart, and that renunciation presupposes acquiring and enjoying things to renounce. Passivity became the keynote of Vedanta, and self-withdrawal its prime virtue. Inertia passed for tranquility, and hopelessness for dispassion. Vedanta's spiritual quest encouraged a morbid inwardness, a flight from the world in despair over life and its problems. Once a teaching of hope and strength, Vedanta of that time exaggerated human weakness, unworthiness, sinfulness, focusing only on human limitations, not on human possibilities. It became a hollow philosophy of life that produced only fake reformers, dreamy idealists, idle philosophers, and so-called knowers of truth who sought transcendental solutions for earthly problems. It created pessimists who proved life intolerable, yet continued to tolerate it. Except in the case of few sannyasins, the wisdom of Vedanta was lost in the wilderness of superstition, false piety, eroticism, occultism and fatalism. The reasons for the eclipse are obvious. Self-knowledge, the goal of Vedanta, has two aspects: mysticism, humanism. One is seeing God with eyes closed, which is mysticism. The other is seeing God with eyes open, as the self of all. The first without the second is sterile. The second without the first is meaningless. Vedanta of 19th century tilted too much toward mysticism and lost sight of the human values and humanism. When mysticism gets separated from humanism, both degenerate. Mysticism turns into dreamy search for salvation in the transcendental cloudland. Humanism without mysticism turns to a secular humanism, becomes the practice of enlightened ego, which eventually degenerates into dark egoism obsessed with self-interest. Philanthropy and works of welfare become drab substitutes for spirituality, futile efforts to fill the spiritual void left by the decay of faith. Where there is nothing beyond to be hoped for, the philosophy of secular humanism tries to make life less wretched. As the tide of spirituality recedes, the tide of materialism rises. We cease to think of our immortal soul, the supreme goal of life, and the sublime secrets of the universe. This is where Western humanism stands today, having lost its link with mysticism. Swami Vivekananda was a synthesis of the cultures of the East and West. The Western readiness to reason its way to truth, its active, often bloody quest for liberty and social justice, fascinated him. In his early youth, he was greatly drawn to these thoughts. Yet in the midst of intellectual joy, there is a deep longing for God, whose existence could not be proved by reason. The true streams of thought created terrible commotion within him, and he became a wandering threat to the holy men of the time. The search for God ultimately brought him to Sri Ramakrishna, whom, after 6 years of struggle, he accepted as his master. From Sri Ramakrishna, he learned the true spirit of Vedanta. If Narendra reasoned too much and doubted too long, it is because his longing for knowledge was too deep and his spiritual hunger was too intense. His contact with the God-man of 19th century India turned the iconoclastic, rebellious Narendra into a flaming Vivekananda. One day, his dying master passed unto him the final word of Vedanta, the worship of the living God. His master asked him, "Be like a huge banyan tree, under whose shade would gather weary souls in search of peace and solace in life." After master's passing, Vivekananda set out on a pilgrimage to the shrines of living God in different parts of the country. What he saw, that India's masses made him restless, brought his mind down from the heights of transcendental consciousness to misery of the world around. He saw the land of all-pervading Brahman filled with cries of sorrow and suffering. Living God in all hearts that Vedanta glorifies was being neglected, insulted, and trampled down. He became determined to put an end to this insult and neglect of the living God. He decided to awaken the masses by sounding the thundering drumbeats of Vedanta. He saw people in India worshipping local superstitions in the name of Vedas and Vedanta. A proliferation of dogmas, creeds, rituals, and theological speculation concealed the real teachings of Vedanta. And Vedanta had become a mere collection of empty ceremonials and intellectual jugglery. Vivekananda saw India in deep spiritual coma. He looked toward the West and realized that he needed Western vigor, courage, tenacity to make Vedanta alive. He wrote that he wished to infuse some of the American spirit into India, that awful mass of conservative jellyfish, and then throw them overboard. There is an apparent contradiction between the outlook of East and that of the West. For the East, knowledge is virtue. It is being as opposed to becoming. For the West, knowledge is not merely satisfaction of virtue, but also a tool to improve the quality of life. Knowledge is becoming. For the East, being. To know is to be able to deal with objects we know in a dynamic way that is practical and capable of changing external nature, accomplishing goals, bringing about material improvement. East speaks of soul at the price of submission, peace of the soul. The West seeks freedom at the price of bloody combat. The East is concerned with finding the ultimate solution to the problems of life by absorption in the silence of the self. It considers the world a mirage, a framework of illusion, a dog's curly tail, impossible to straighten. Progress, East says, is illusory. We live not in a progressive world, but in a changing world. To try to build the kingdom of heaven on earth is futile. Nothing truly good will be achieved by material improvement. There is no use of trying to make the dog's curly tail straight, to run after mirage for water. It is foolish to try to save the world of delusion and make it better. Liberation of the soul calls for renunciation of desires, not their multiplication. The West looks upon these views as pessimistic, otherworldly, self-defeating. The ultimate goal can never be reached by bypassing immediate needs. One who is not fit for this earth is not fit for heaven. Without material fulfillment, hope for spiritual attainment is empty dream. Without fulfillment of legitimate desires, our disinterestedness leads only to uninterestedness, dispassion to depression, and self-surrender to self-pity. The West holds that however the East may brand the world as illusory and unreal, we know it to be too real. That the saints and mystics struggle hard to overcome its temptations of this world only shows that the world is real and has the power. The human individual is not just a soul, but body, mind, soul. For the West, liberation is cessation of suffering. As John Dewey said, when you are lost in a forest, the way out is the way by which you get out. Life calls for educating ourselves to face reality by knowing that we have nothing to rely on except on our own power and potentiality. The West looks upon Eastern way as a life-negating, depressive, and its so-called moralism as weakness. Such a way engenders self-isolation, self-individualism, cowardly retreat from the challenges of life. The East is viewed as gloomy, fatalistic, impractical, and brooding. The East responds by saying that the Western way, with its love of unrestrained pleasure, is suicidal. Its so-called life-asserting views only create speed without destination. In the name of reason, its philosophy goes in a circle. And blind pragmatism seeks to nourish the body and the mind at the cost of the soul. The greatness of a person to be judged not by what he does, but by what he is. For the East, the West is viewed as shallow, drunk, noisy, and naive. Vivekananda saw the Western way as a missing counterpart of Vedanta. He admired the Western spirit, its penchant for heading into the future with courage and tenacity, its impatience not to wait for things to happen, but to make them happen, and its readiness to take responsibility and risk and make mistakes and forge ahead, propelled by nothing but one's own will. So he wrote in one of his letters, "I love the Yankee land. I like to see new. I have too much vigor in my blood. In America is the place, the people, the opportunity for everything new. I have become horribly radical." This pluck and thrust of Western spirit fascinated Vivekananda. He passionately believed the wisdom of the soul would never become a social reality without the support of the Western spirit. And the Western way, unless guided toward wisdom of the soul, would be the surest way to doom and destruction. Vedanta, in order to be complete, must combine the spirit of the East and the West. The most important contribution of his new Vedanta is practicality. He replaces humanitarian ideals of compassion and charity with spiritual approach to the service of living God. Practical Vedanta calls to make a spiritual reality a social reality, everyday reality. The new Vedanta regards the four yogas, path of knowledge, devotion, selfless action and concentration, as four independent paths leading to the goal of self-knowledge, a departure from the old view that the first yoga was the highest and culmination of the three. The new approach not only declares that the individual is divine, but also daring faith in that divinity. Practical Vedanta rejects the belief that the brain is the appendage of the genital gland, the view that leads to the neglect of the most important aspects of man's being. Practical Vedanta is not just a philosophy, a guideline for robust living, for being divine and fully human at the same time. The new Vedanta, available to all, he made it. Its practice does not require a person to have male body, Brahmin birth, to live in seclusion in forest. A reference to Shankaracharya's Vivekananda, a Brahmin body, male body. The old Vedanta said that one who does not believe in God was an atheist. Vivekananda's Vedanta says, who does not believe in himself is an atheist. For the new Vedanta, material and spiritual development are conjoined. Work and worship go together. The inner and outer dimension of a person must be balanced in a pleasing harmony. The new approach does not believe in God, who promises a person eternal bliss in heaven, but cannot give him food here. Practical Vedanta is an active spiritual quest. Vivekananda foresaw that the East needed the West as much the West needed East, not only for success, but also for survival. In his view, India possesses the wisdom of the soul, but lacks a strong body to house the soul. The West, on the other hand, possesses a strong body, but lacks the soul. The soul and the body must be united to make it meaningful. The West needs the wisdom of the soul so that its mighty achievements in science, technology will not prove self-destructive. India needs the Western muscle, vigor, vitality, human concern. In the words of Vivekananda, by preaching the profound secrets of Vedanta, in the Western world, we should attract sympathy and regard for those mighty nations, maintaining for ourselves the position of their teachers in spiritual matters. Let them remain our teachers in all material concern. In his message, he called for strength. Make your nerves strong. No more weeping. Stand on your feet and be men. Religion will come later on. Be strong, my friend, that is my advice. You'll nearer to heaven by playing football than through study of the Bhagavad Gita. But you have to play football, not watch. Doctor said you should do exercise. Patient said yes. After 1 week asked, he said, yes, I used to watch golf, now I watch football. That is my... Of Hinduism he observed, no religion on earth preaches dignity of humanity in such lofty strain as Hinduism, and no religion on earth trades upon the necks of the poor and low in such a fashion as in Hinduism. Vivekananda's new Vedanta created a star both in the East and the West. While many universalists scientifically minded applauded his new message, the noble-minded breathed the air of freedom. But the entrenched dogmatists denounced his teaching as monstrous and profane. They concocted false stories, spread rumors about his authenticity, and invented vilest of lies. There were also attempts in India to suppress Vivekananda and his message. Leaders of Orthodox Hindu society derided Vivekananda and his message as a veiled imitation of Christianity. They accused him of violations of caste rules and monastic traditions on the grounds that he had crossed the black waters of the ocean. His fellow followers, the monks of the Ramakrishna order, engaged in the work of service, nursing the sick, providing the poor, and conducting epidemic and other relief work were branded as scavenger monks, whose conduct was unworthy of monastic life. The old Vedanta says people are dying by karma. So long my breakfast, luncheon is okay. That is an incident, it is not a story. Swami Vivekananda's disciple, Swami Adiswarananda, he said, if you are my disciple, after giving him initiation, he said, where is my dakshina, fee, guru? Swami Adiswarananda said, this is me, your fee. He said, good. Go, if you are my disciple, do something for the poor. Gave him few pennies, send him to hard work. Working for the poor was not part of the Vedanta until Vivekananda came. There was a famous man in Rishikesh. His name was Dhanaraj Giri. Dhanaraj Giri was hosting a bhandara. Bhandara means where you invite all the holy men of the town. But they excluded Swami Adiswarananda and his brother disciple Swami Adiswarananda, because they nurse the sick, clean them, cure them. Dhanaraj Giri inquired, have they been invited? The manager said, no, sir, because they do not fall into the category of Orthodox Vedanta monks. He said, go by all means, you bring them. They ran. With much entreaty, Swami Adiswarananda agreed. When he came, he told the assembly of monks, if these two had not come, I would have cancelled this bhandara here. You blame that they are doing nursing the sick. Who did you? Your own mothers did you when you were young. When you are sick, they are doing the job of what your mother and father did. Be careful. That was the first, he was a very respected man. And it he sent a chill to all these who are sitting there anxious to eat puri and laddu. You don't know puri and laddu. Laddu is form of sweet and puri is like a pancake you fry. This is. Free society, somebody driving a car, somebody driving a Davidson, somebody walking, somebody standing in one leg. Somebody, if you walk, a foreigner with rolling eyes, hey, come on here. Your destiny is this. You are going to gain a big reward in 3 days. Obviously, then you will come back. Human nature is that. Who wants to listen to your Vedanta, astrology? I told you when I went to India with 4 or 5 of our students, American, I was taking them to Benares. I was in my ochre cloth and seeing some Westerners, they're sitting there, they know English. Sir, this thread is sacred. If you wear this, you will get a good job. You will pass exam. You will be able to marry the person whom you want. I told our young fellows, friends, I said, get out from here. Don't listen. But they went. We came back to our Sevastram hospital center. Afternoon I saw each one is wearing a thread. I said, where did you get? He said, when you were taking rest, we all went and bought. So my preaching did not help. The same love that was born as Buddha the Compassionate once again assumed human form in Vivekananda. His unbounded love for suffering mankind that gave Vivekananda the mandate for his message. It gave him power that nobody could match, a wisdom that no doctrine could qualify. His message bridged the gulf between man and God, broke to the walls of traditionally separate physical form and spiritual. Saints and sages think ahead of the contemporary world. They come to give us not the things we want, but the things we need. Contemporary society condemned Socrates to die, denounced Buddha, crucified Jesus. Truth must struggle hard against entrenched dogma, hardened superstition, credulous mass thinking. In spite of opposition, Vivekananda scattered the seeds of Vedanta wherever he went. In prophetic mood, Vivekananda said that this message will sustain the world for the next 1500 years. There is another prophecy. A day will come for a piece of hair of Vivekananda, there will be riots on the streets. Third, he said, India's rise would be spiritual rise. It will be such a rise, even the Vedic period will pale into insignificance. Hard to believe, but this is, he said. Science has taken the dogma-based religion to the very root. The decay of organized religion is in the air. In spite of all our technological advances, the world is experiencing great spiritual void. For many, the word liberated means liberated from all religions. The myths and symbols that once gave emotional support to humankind have been seconded by the cold conclusions of science. After 30 years of war, Europe lost faith in God. And after 2 world wars, humankind lost faith in itself. A culture of unbelief and skepticism has pervaded the world. Whatever claims the idealists put forth and materialists try to disprove, no dogma-based religion will fill the spiritual void. Vivekananda has silently, surely influenced the thought currents of the world. When Vivekananda visited America, Robert Ingersoll, a famous orator and agnostic, told him, quote, 50 years ago, you would have been hanged if you had come to preach to this country. If you had come even much later, you would have been stoned. But today, religions are in a process of continuous dialogue, as there are more consciousness of the world unity than before. The voice of spirituality is being louder and louder, and the wave of spiritual democracy is breaking down the barrier of religiosity. Vivekananda, the worshipper of living God, he made God in the hearts of all sole object of worship. Even as a child, he would be overwhelmed to see the suffering of the poor. To see and serve God became the dream of his wandering days. He lived with the poor masses of India, slept with them, ate with them, cried for their material salvation. Untiringly, he lobbied for them with his master Sri Ramakrishna. Service of living God was the joy of his last days. Like Prometheus of old, he brought down the spiritual power from heaven and made it spring up on the earth in the hearts of all. This shifting of God from a power of heaven to human heart as the inmost self makes a momentous advance in the spiritual history of the world. Vivekananda passed away in 1902, before reaching the age of 40. He prophesied, I will leave before 40. But he left behind a promise for his living God. It may be I shall find it good to get outside my body, to cast it off like a worn-out garment. But I shall not cease to work. I shall inspire men everywhere until the world shall know that it is one with God. Thank you. Om Jananing Saradang Deving Ramakrishnang Jagatgurung Padapadmetayo Sritva Pranavami Bhurmu. We bow down to Mother Saradan, the great Master Sri Ramakrishna. We take refuge at their feet and bow down to them over and over again. Om, peace, peace be unto us and to all living beings. Thank you for coming.